Hey everybody, I'm Michelle and welcome to Live with Raising a Reader. Thanks for joining us for the June episode of our Radical Collaboration series. We have an awesome guest today, someone who lives and breathes collaboration. Our guest today is someone who I've only recently met, and I'm really looking forward to getting to know him better today. He's the Council for a Strong America President and CEO, Barry Ford.
Great to meet you. Good to see you.
Hi, very good to see you. Real quick I want to share with our viewers a quick description on the Council for a Strong America. The Council for a Strong America is a national bipartisan nonprofit that unites 5 organizations comprised of about 9,000 law enforcement leaders, retired admirals and generals, business executives, pastors, and prominent coaches and athletes who promote evidence-based solutions that will enable the next generation to grow up healthy, well-educated, and prepared for productive lives. Council for a Strong America has a 25-year track record of effective policy advocacy, bridging ideological divides, and elevating key issues above the partisan fray. And oh my gosh, I cannot wait to learn more. Hi, Barry. Where are you joining us from today, Barry?
I'm joining you from Washington, D.C. Our national office is based in Washington, D.C.
And I do want to ask, are you in your office? Are you back in?
I am. I'm back in the office. It's been a long time coming. It feels a little weird. A lot of calendars are still on March 2020. So that's a little strange. But
well, hopefully you didn't find too many dead plants or half-empty, maybe evaporated coffee mugs at this point.
It's really strange. Yeah.
That's so funny. Well, I'm here in... Oh, go ahead.
The plants are unfortunate victims of the pandemic.
I lost a few. I'm here. I'm still at home on my Costco table, Barry. I'm in Marin County in San Rafael, here in Northern California. So really great to join you today. Thank you for taking the time to be here in conversation with our Raising a Reader family and community. And Barry, I have to say that you're leading this organization with nearly 9,000 leaders. And to me, you're kind of like a 1 in a million leader. I was reading about you and I'm like, this leader is like a black belt in radical collaboration himself. The work that you're doing and have done. And I know that I couldn't do your career path justice because you've contributed across so many sectors that led you here to your leadership role at the Council for a Strong America. And I wondered if you could just tell us a little bit about your professional journey and how did we get so lucky to have you in this position, uniting us?
Sure. Happy to share. You're incredibly generous in your description of my career path. However, coming out of college, I wanted to. I knew this. I knew I wanted to be part of organizations and do work that would have meaningful impact in public policy. That was my starting point, right? And so, before law school, I worked for state government in Albany. Worked in the first Cuomo administration. He was I was a fanboy of Mario Cuomo. I did that prior to law school. After graduating from law school, I did what a lot of newly minted lawyers with fancy degrees do. I went to work for a large law firm in New York City. Mm-hmm. I knew that wasn't going to be my permanent path. As I told you, I wanted to be in public policy. So about 7 years into being an associate at the major law firm, I decided to run for Congress. And I ran twice. In 90 and in 2000, I did probably the hardest thing you can do as a new politician. I ran against a Democratic incumbent. I'm a Democrat in my own party in the Democratic primary. Now, mind you, I was running in Brooklyn. So the district I was running in, Democrats outnumbered Republicans 9-1. So the winner of the primary is essentially the winner of the general election. So that's why you win the primary. The reason I challenged the man is that he had a long history of not being an effective person, not being really serious. I lost twice because he's an incumbent member of Congress. But so after I did that, I still wanted to be involved in the public sector, and I went to work for Mark Green when he was running for the mayoralty of New York City. They just had their election yesterday.
Yeah.
But 20 years ago, Mark was the odds-on favorite to win the mayoralty, and he lost to Bloomberg. So 3 failed elections over the course of 3 years. I decided I needed a job, I needed a career path that did not require somebody winning an election. So that's when I went into nonprofit leadership, and I haven't looked back since. So first job out of that set of circumstances was with the After School Corporation in New York City. It's now called Expanded Ed Schools.
Yeah.
And it's actually there that I developed, one, a capacity and a passion for advocacy for children and youth.
Mm-hmm.
That's where it started. And that's, my goodness, that's 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And since then, I've been a local lobbyist on behalf of nonprofits in New York City. I've worked for the United States Tennis Association doing similar things, helping the Tennis Association create after-school programs and outreach programs in particularly disadvantaged communities where tennis and education programming in the after-school space could give kids greater chances for success. One key example that's relevant to what you're doing. One of the programs we worked incredibly closely with, actually a couple of them, they would have literacy as their key base. So it's an after-school program, typically elementary school age. Kids would get to swing in the racket a little bit, learn a little bit about how to move on the court, to the extent they could. And then they would spend time reading books that were relevant and powerful for them. And that's an amazing model. It's still going on across the country, but that was an amazing model. I moved to DC. I was doing all that work in New York. We moved to DC with the Obama administration. My wife wanted to join the administration. Ultimately, she did, but not when we moved. She ended up joining 5 years later. And because of that move, I still worked for the United States Tennis Association for several years, but then the commute from Washington to New York was a lot. And so I wanted a job that was based here. And that's when I joined Council for a Strong America. And what drew me to this organization, now I told you, by that time I would have been involved in youth and child-related advocacy for about 15 years, right?
Yeah.
Every policymaker, no matter what level of government I talk with, federal, state, or local, they would always say, we're with you with the kids. We absolutely want to support programming for kids. We want to fund them. We care deeply, right? Yeah. Everyone would say that.
Yeah.
Yet when it came time to write the check, when it came time to appropriate the money, families and children were always last in line. They weren't. Yeah. They always said, well, we've got to fund public safety. We've got to fund economic development. At the national level, we got to fund our national security. So when I joined this organization, I felt as though I was joining an organization where I had a posse.
A big one at that.
To dramatically change the conversation around the priority for investing in children and families beginning at the earliest ages. Because that's how we, promote community safety. That's how we ensure the future of our workforce and the strength of our economy. That's how we promote the security of our country, by ensuring that kids that want to and have the interest to serve their country in the military are able to do it when it comes their time, because they're not obese, or they were able to graduate from high school, or they were kept out of the juvenile justice system because they were successful in school, because they were read to as kids. So you get the idea. Being part of a team that could reframe that in an incredible and powerful way, well, it's transformative. And so that's I've been with this organization for 6 years, and I've had this is interesting, progressively 5 different jobs on my way to becoming president and CEO within this organization.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. It's I loved learning about your career path and about the different leaders that you're bringing to the table. And that I've seen, it seems like you have some themes in your career path around data, future thinking. You can see what we can't. Oftentimes it sounds like, obviously, the youth, and really that unification, which is really cool. I wonder if you could share with us a little bit about, for those who don't know, about Council for a Strong America, and maybe giving an example of where we may have seen your work show up in our own communities.
Sure, that's a great question. So let me start with sort of how we're structured. We have members in every state and in almost every congressional district, and that's intentional. We fundamentally see our role as organizers. We organize discrete and specific populations, but we're organizers. And part of organizing is meeting the target of your organizing where they are and connecting what you're trying to move with what they care about.
Yeah.
And so that's why the evidence base, that's why the research is so important. So we have state staff based in 9 states. So Washington, Oregon, California. We have 5 staff members in California. Texas, Colorado, Illinois, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Maine.
Okay.
I won't go into the details as to why those states specifically, but there's some strategy around it and some sort of idiosyncratic nature around it. It's too detailed to go into. But in those places, though, where we have staff, our staff members are deeply embedded in the coalitions that range from prenatal, very early childhood issues through college and career. Wow. So as an example, I mean, in Pennsylvania, our 2 state directors there, we have one state director who manages our law enforcement voices and the other who helps organize and coordinate our business leader and our military voices. They sit in leadership roles in the pre-K coalition of that state.
Oh, wow.
The state director that is managing our military voice and our business voice chairs a communications committee of that coalition. Wow. You can see why, right? Part of our value to a coalition is that we are great at changing the narrative around these issues, raising their importance, bringing in policymakers who ordinarily might not think, well, every policymaker cares about kids. So
of course.
But might not prioritize the investment again because they care about other stuff. Having the police chief from their city or the sheriff from their county or one of the major employers in their town come to see them and say, I'm not seeing you on my behalf. I'm seeing you because we know, as the Pennsylvania example, we know that investments in pre-K are really critical and important in the future of the state. Let me give you one of the outcomes from that work. The legislature in Pennsylvania is Republican. The governor is a Democrat. Yeah. The Republican majority leader of the Appropriations Committee, in a speech a couple of years ago, said, "We've gone through very difficult times as a state, and the overall budget has been cut by $700 million. But over that same period of time, the only part of the budget that has grown, and it grew by 123 million, something like that, was the pre-K funding, early childhood, early care and education funding. And the reason for that," he was very explicit, "is the coalitions that came together to talk to us about it. From the parents to the providers to the law enforcement leaders, the retired military folks, and the business people." And so that's the power of this level of deep collaboration and effort. It's amazing.
That's radical collaboration right there. And that's happening all across the country, Barry. That's happening in communities all across the country.
It is. And the thing now, I want to be fair. So that happens in a place like Pennsylvania because we have staff in the state.
Yeah.
We can go deep and it's not just building deep relationships with our own members, it's building deep relationships with partners, right?
Right.
We also work in other states where we don't have staff. And those relationships are different, still powerful, but different, right? Because then, let me use Georgia as an example. We are deeply reliant on our in-state partners to guide us and help us. And we can't be as deep and intentional with our own work because we don't have the staff. We don't have the staff capacity to do it. But what we can do is be targeted and effective in a way that really helps that state level coalition. Yeah. And so having a good state partner say, look, we need you to meet with, we love that kind of direction, right? We need you to meet with on these issues with the majority leader, the speaker, blah, 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 whatever, right? And then we take that information, we do some mapping, figure out which of our members has the best relationship access or would resonate most with that particular policymaker target, and we do it. In Georgia, mind you, it's a relatively small example, but we had that kind of meeting with, again, the chair of their appropriations committee, again, in Georgia, the entire state government's Republican. And we're able, at the last minute, just before the budget was going to be voted on by the legislature, to get a $500,000 increase in the pre-K budget that wasn't currently being considered. It's that kind of stuff that we're able to do in partnership. Again, deep relational, but we need a partner that understands our value and is able to help us navigate how we can most effectively deploy our particular voices in any particular campaign, whether it's early in the campaign or at the end of the campaign.
Barry, how might our listeners or viewers, if someone's coming to mind for them, like, oh, my brother-in-law is a police officer, or my cousin Betty has the largest firm down on Main Street.
Yeah.
How might we get more people involved in the work that you're doing?
I love that question. The first step is to go to our website, strongnation.org, and you'll see, once you get to the site, essentially channels or buttons for each of our different voices, and you pick one of them. And if your sister or sister-in-law is a major proprietor in your hometown, they go to Ready Nation. What that does is there's a link that says, join us, and there's a form you can fill out. And once you fill that out, one, you'll start getting our information, but two, you'll be, someone from our Ready Nation team at the national level will reach out to you and inform you as to what your opportunities could be. So the key to think about this is all of our members are volunteers, right? Yeah. Again, they come to advocacy for children and families, not from their day jobs, right? It's not what they do all the time. So we encourage people to be as invested and as engaged as they can afford to be and as they want to be. And so that can go from, testifying in front of the state legislature, or meeting members of Congress, or simply signing on to a letter from the organization saying, this is what we care about on these issues, and have it either go to the state legislature if it's a state sign-on letter, or go to Congress if it's a national sign-on letter. It ranges. It can be, we ask you to participate in a media launch, where we're report, or you could sign a letter to the editor or an op-ed. The level of engagement is dependent upon the interest and the energy of that person.
That's awesome. And one thing that had stood out to me, Barry, is similar to us. We do a lot of work in rural communities across the country. Yeah. It's something that I'm most proud of about our organization, that we're able to have a broad footprint in service with our communities that are less densely populated. Sure. And I wondered if you might be able to share with our viewers a little bit about, from your point of view, from a policy point of view, the impact that the lack of access to quality care is having in our rural communities, and why diverse sets of stakeholders should care.
Yeah, I'm really glad you mentioned that. And again, on our website, you can see a number of reports and briefs we've done on the importance of childcare in rural America, and a set of videos that we've done. The states we've highlighted, Maine, Ohio, Mississippi, Nebraska, and California. So you can see those on our site. Let me start by saying 1/2 of all Americans live in childcare deserts, which means for every 3 children that are eligible and need that need care, there's only one childcare slot, basically, one option. In rural communities, it's worse. It's 60%. And so, as you can imagine, in rural communities, the type of care that is most prevalent are family homes, or family-based childcare. 97% of all the childcare settings in America are family-based childcare settings. Yet, at the state and federal level, policy gets in the way of, one, maximizing the quality of those settings and enabling those settings to thrive. It's a critical piece of the childcare infrastructure, and yet we have policy decisions and efforts that make it difficult for people to do, one, get into the business, living doing it, and have the resources and the training they need to do it well. That is crazy. So one of the things we're advocating for is at the federal level to help incentivize with this new federal attention on childcare, have the federal government fund and support the resources and the supports that family-based childcare needs. So.
Yeah. And are you hopeful? I know there's a lot of bipartisan support right now, and polls are showing that. Are you hopeful that that we might have some policies that can make some real systemic change in rural communities and beyond?
I am. I am hopeful that it can happen in this calendar year. I don't think it's going to happen now, right? It's not going to be immediate, but I do think the momentum at the national level, the attention of this administration, the long-term bipartisan nature of this issue, I am hopeful that we'll get to something really positive by the end of the year.
And what will that mean for our workforce?
It should mean, if it goes away, I hope it goes. So look, I can't see the future, but this is where my hope is, right?
In my world, you can. You're kind of the one that's out there with that big telescope. Like Barry knows you're going to be my new oracle.
So my hope is that we get to a commitment to help states be able to and communities be able to pay providers living wages to their staff. Yes. And that only can happen with substantial federal and state subsidies, because right now parents are carrying too much of the burden of funding child care and early care systems, and it's too expensive for them and not enough for the provider. So it's a system that screaming out for government support and sustained government support and subsidy because of its importance to our economy.
And man, the spotlight has really been shown on that these past 14 to 16 months of the pandemic. So we're with you. How can our viewers get engaged? Will you say that website one more time? How can we get engaged, learn more about you and support your work? And support the work of the bipartisan nature of these of the legislation.
Exactly right. Strongnation.org. And we also have, when you go to the site, you'll see some of our Twitter feeds. And so, like us on Twitter. We're going to be doing a major social media campaign starting next month. So keep a lookout on that. It's an exciting time for us, an exciting time for the entire field. So it's an exciting conversation thinking about childcare as a core infrastructure issue and what that could mean for our families today and the future of the workforce. So I appreciate that. I have to ask you one last question before we go. And this, we've got a lot of children's book lovers listening to us and watching us today, Barry. And I'd love to know, from your point of view, what children's book should be on everybody's bookshelf? Look, I have several that I loved reading to my kids when they were growing up, and that I loved as a kid. But the one I would say is sort of a foundational head standard is Where the Wild Things Are by Maurice Sendak. I think you got to have that one.
Got to have that one, Barry. I agree. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to connect with us today and to be with our viewers. And viewers, thank you for joining us live with Raising a Reader. Barry Ford, have a great day. I can't wait till our next conversation.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.